Hello and welcome to There's No Business Like, a podcast where friends and industry colleagues explore topics and interview leaders in our industry of professional theatrical touring.
Hey everyone, it's Katie with There's No Business Like. I am so excited to welcome you to our episode today. I invited three of our best minds in the industry, Donna Walker-Kuhne, Gary Minyard, and Marisol Sánchez-Best, to discuss the challenges and nuances of community engagement programming in 2025. And believe me, this is such an in-depth and wonderful conversation, but it doesn't even begin to scratch the surface of the work that we do in our community. So I'm really excited to share this conversation with you. And I think it's one you're going to want to listen to twice. So thanks again to Gary, Marisol, and Donna for their time and sharing their knowledge with us. And if you want to connect directly with them for further questions, conversation, or to learn more about the programming that they talk about in this episode, please reach out to me via our podcast social media, and I would be happy to connect you directly. All right, here is my conversation on community engagement with Gary Minyard, Marisol Sánchez-Best, and Donna Walker-Kuhne.
Hi, everyone. My name is Marisol Sánchez-Best, and I am the Director of Education and Community Engagement for Seattle Theater Group. We are located in Seattle, Washington, in downtown, and we have a number of venues. We have the Paramount, the historic Paramount Theater, the More, the Neptune. We operate a farm as well in our newly acquired space, Cary Hall.
Hi, I'm Gary Minyard. I'm the Chief Creative Officer at Dayton Live in Dayton, Ohio. And we also have several venues, including an historic theater called the Victoria Theater, the newer Schuster Center, and that's our big space. And then we have several 200-seat spaces, a parking garage. We also rent some space. And we basically are having those things active all the time.
Hello, I'm Donna Walker-Kuhne. I'm Senior Advisor of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion at New Jersey Performing Arts Center in Newark, New Jersey. I lead all of our diversity, equity, and inclusion training, as well as our social justice programming. We too have a number of venues that we present, not just our paid events, but over 200 events for free in the community. And we have identified those partners that enable us to be authentic and to respond to their specific interests and needs.
And I'm Katie Trask-Miller of Michigan Maven Creative Associates, one of your hosts here at There's No Business Like. It is such a pleasure to have all three of you with us today, experts in the field of community engagement. I am so excited to dive into this conversation. So we're going to start off. I just want to invite each of you to give us maybe a 2-minute overview of your careers just to set the stage for our conversation so we know a little bit more about you. And then we're going to dive right into talking about community engagement. So Marisol, do you want to start off?
Absolutely. So I'm Marisol Sánchez-Best, as I mentioned previously, originally from Oaxaca, Mexico. And I have been in education for as long as I can remember. I'm a graduate from San Diego State University, and I did my master's degree in theater at the University of Florida. Go Gators. And then worked in various locations. I traveled to Mexico to do a lot of educational training in communities, rural communities. And I focused on Oaxaca for a while because that's where I'm from. And then came back to the States and started working at La Jolla Playhouse, and then made my trajectory to Seattle. And I have been working I started working at various companies in Seattle, where I eventually landed at Seattle Theater Group, and it has been nothing but a fun and wild journey.
Excellent. Well, welcome to the podcast. Gary, what about you?
Well, I came to community engagement and education very late in my career. I started out as a performer. I went to the University of Houston and got to work with Edward Albee and Jose Quintero and did shows at the Alley. Then I worked professionally for a little bit, then went overseas to the Lecoq School in Paris. And then when I came back, I toured for about 12 years, directing and choreographing and performing. I performed in 48 of our 50 states. I know. And then I just wound up working. I had a mentor basically challenge me, as we're working on a show, like, what do you want? And I said, well, put me on staff. And she said, well, I think you should go to grad school. So I went to Arizona State and have an MFA in theater for youth and directing. From there, I helped create an artificially intelligent classroom. I was the first student to direct on their main stage. I wound up director of education at Phoenix Theater before I graduated, and really just tons of doors opened for me. And then I wound up going across the country to be an artistic director. And now I'm in the presenting world. So I've gone from producer to presenter.
Excellent. All right, Donna, let's hear your story, which I know is long and varied.
Yes, I'm definitely going to keep it short. Thank you so much for the opportunity to be here, always with my wonderful colleagues. I never could say no to that. But I started out as a professional dancer, and then realized I didn't know any dancers that made money, so I decided to become a lawyer. So I wanted to change the world. So I graduated from Howard University Law School and moved to New York. And that began my career as prosecuting attorney, but doing volunteer work on my lunch hour, teaching myself how to be an arts administrator. When my lunch hour started to extend until 4 p.m. and judges were looking for Counsel Walker, I knew I had found my mission. And so I wrote myself a proposal to pay myself a salary as the managing director of the Thelma Hill Performing Arts Center. And then from there, I wanted to go back to dance. So I wrote a letter to Arthur Mitchell at the Dance Theater of Harlem and became their marketing director, toured internationally and nationally with the company. And it was during those tours that we realized that there was a very, very low attendance from the Black community. And so that's when I started to really hone in on what was needed to invite them to sustain their participation. After 9 years, I got a call from George C. Wolfe at the Public Theater inviting me to come there and make the audiences look like a subway stop. And so I did that in addition to carrying that same mission to Broadway. That's how I got involved in Broadway productions. And then wanting to start a family and realize, that this really consumes your life and in a wonderful way. So I started my own company, Walker International Communications Group, consulting to Broadway, theater, and dance. So all my loves come together every day. And since this time, I've been able to travel all around the world. And I've only one state I've not lectured in. Thanks to my book, Invitation to the Party has taken me everywhere to talk about audience development. My second book, hopefully, will be out this spring, Champions for the Arts. And I teach at NYU, Bank Street, and Columbia University because one of my missions in life is to raise the next generation of arts administrators who understand humanity in their work and understand how to apply it on a daily basis.
Well, and Donna, it's an honor to have you as well as our other guests. I have your book on my bookshelf right behind me in the next room, actually. So it's such a pleasure to have you all today. So let's just start with some language. I think language is a really important place to start in terms of understanding what we're actually going to discuss today. So can the three of you, in your own roles, in your own experiences, define for us what is community engagement to you and in the work that you do? It's a pretty broad term. And I think for our purposes today, we want to define what it means to each of us and what it means within the industry. So whomever would like to start.
I would say that community engagement, and I'll keep it simple because it's so broad and what we do is so broad. And I feel like actually our department, our fields, it's probably one of the departments that touches everything and everyone, and it just does so much that it's really hard. However, to explain. However, I feel that I would define it as collaborating with community to create experiences that are relevant to community. And it's with community, it's for community, and ensuring that both community and organization are feeling that there's a balance or benefit between both places, or depending on who you're working with.
I love that. That idea of balance and benefits. I love that language. Thank you for sharing that. That's great.
I think for me, I'm going to do a yes and. There's going to be lots of yes and. Okay.
Yeah.
So in addition to what Marisol just said, I would add to it this idea of the elimination of the transaction. So the idea from my perspective is the work that I am trying to do is connecting the art in people's lives through a different pathway than just a ticket purchase. And that takes on a ton of different forms. And we're dealing with cradle to grave age groups. And so it isn't easy, but the unfortunate reality is that community engagement, because it is so broad in so many ways, is impossible to define. But for me, I look at that word engagement and I'm looking at ways for people to engage in the art form. And then to Marisol's point, like how can that art form then contribute to that community? And it's not necessarily an outreach. It's not necessarily an inreach. It's just whatever the circumstances are for us when we're around a certain group of people, how can we then take this art form and make sure that the people can dive into it using their own creativity, maybe. And, so for me, it's really that it's trying to omit the transaction and recommit to the engagement.
Boy, I love these definitions. These are great. And I would add on, I would definitely agree with everything they've said. For me, one of the clearest distinctions is, as Gary's mentioned, audience development is transactional. It is absolutely about selling tickets, moving that revenue forward. And that's garnered as a success. Community engagement, I believe, is about really building accessibility of the arts into the communities where people live. That's what they are interested in. So you take away this hat of being a curator for someone's arts experience, and you facilitate the space and the opportunity for them to enjoy the arts. Whether or not they come back to your venue is not the goal. The goal is that they are enjoying what is important to them. And we've actually pioneered this in a systemic way at New Jersey Performing Arts Center. We have a community engagements department that I created in 2016, specifically because I noticed that people of color were not coming in the building. They were not coming to our events. It's like we're in Newark. It's 95% people of color. What's happening? And after talking with people and realized there was a number of reasons. They didn't know what the programming was. They didn't know anyone in the building. They didn't necessarily feel invited. And so we built these events that we do, which is our work. It's a performing arts center. We take dance, we take music, we take reading to the various communities. And it has been incredibly successful. We have over 30,000 people that we engage from community engagement lens that has nothing to do with them purchasing tickets. So absolutely, this is an essential component of building an arts audience. I believe we need both. We need audience development. We have to drive revenue, of course, but we absolutely need community engagement. So when you have both, then that's when I think you have healthy audiences and healthy programs to advance and go forward.
So Donna, playing off of that, I think the term community engagement and audience development are sometimes used interchangeably, but they're not actually the same thing. So what is the interplay between education, community engagement, audience development, and then marketing too? Because a lot of times in my experience, marketing will go, oh, that's a community engagement thing when it's actually a marketing thing. Or community engagement will go, oh, that's a marketing thing when it's actually a community engagement thing. So what is the interplay between sort of those four areas, and whose role is sort of what? And how do you then work collaboratively to reach your end goal of not only engaging the community, getting more people in the building, having a better reputation profile in the community? Like all of those things sort of play together in the same pond, but they are separate from each other too.
So marketing to me is the frame, the framework that builds the language, that creates the tools, that allows you to be able to be nimble as you're talking to different constituents. So marketing is fundamental to that. At NJPAC, we have redesigned our arts education, community engagement, audience development into a new department called social impact. So we now have a senior VP of social impact that weaves all of these efforts together. So arts education is a critical component of community engagement. Community engagement is a critical component of arts education. And what is happening is that there's this intersection that's become quite organic on how all of us are responding to the needs of our constituents, as well as highlighting the kind of events and programs that we do on our campus. And we're not even a year in to this new model, but already it feels so much less conflict, so that it's not departments bumping heads. we're all running together. And so by having these meetings together, we can look at language, how do we inform each other's programs? I think it's really going to be incredibly successful.
With what Donna is saying, NJPAC has an enormous, impact on their community. Just the whole idea, and I think for many performing arts centers across the country, what they are running into is maybe a marketing department that is calling something community engagement because they don't want to do it. Right? It's like.
Yes.
And it's not about it being malicious or like they're not doing work. It's really the difference being that Donna and her team, Marisol and her team, me and my team have actually on purpose educated the other departments about what it is that we do. So they're not throwing around terms that they don't know what the answers are. And instead of making arbitrary decisions about whether it's audience development or community engagement, that there has been some sort of framework that's been created or a conversation that's been created between departments. So even if you're in a small building and there's a one-person marketing team, it's probably even more essential to make sure that they understand where you're coming from, so that we all know that community engagement has a lot of definitions, and your building may only be able to do a certain number of things a year, but you want them to be successful and have impact, but you don't want to run into friction because other staff in other departments are viewing what you're doing as audience development, or maybe there's an opportunity for someone to come to a show. Maybe, I don't know, there's all sorts of opportunities for community engagement in ways that even your department aren't thinking of. One of those obstacles that I have encountered is educating other departments about what the priorities of the company are, what it is, how we're defining things. And as that synergy moves forward, we're finding more and more success, even though there's a lot more work to be done.
Katie, I really like this question because it reminded me of something that we discussed with this group. So this group here, we're all part of a group that is part of the Presenting Arts Centers, and we come together, and there's about 50 different organizations that are part of this group, right? And it's reminding me, and I don't know if you remember, Donna and Gary, our first conference that we did, this was a hot topic, even within our own teams, when we invited education teams and then community engagement teams. And what we did is we separated both tracks, right? We intentionally had some groups go on one side and then the other. And within our teams too, they were like, wait, where am I going? Because a lot of the organizations that we're also collaborating and working with don't have two separate teams. We happen to be separated, or at least my team does, and I know Donna's too, and Gary, I think you guys do too as well.
We're actually together.
Yeah. Okay. And so that started conversations. And to be quite honest, it even started conversations within our own teams of saying, like, what is the separation between education and community engagement? Because are you within community engagement educating people as well? Are you collaborating with them? Are you doing these things? And I think what needs to happen is at some point we need to make decisions, right? We need to figure out where that line is drawn if we want to go that route. And I remember in JPAC at one point, and Donna, correct me if I'm wrong, but I feel like at one point you guys said anything that is curriculum based, anything that happens in the schools, that's education. Anything outside of that, well, community engagement does it. And then in my brain, I personally was having a hard time with that because I was like, wait, you're teaching artists with your books program, Donna. They're going out into community, but that's education there, you know?
Right.
But I feel like at some point we also need to figure out what is that delineation so departments are not crossing with each other. And yes, it all educates. And to be quite honest, it's all community engagement. It's like, how do we delineate that? And how do we make it where people are not just struggling? And so our department, that's how we're broken down. So anything curriculum based in our zone is education, with the exception that we can go in non-school settings as well for education. So we could be at a community center, but if we are providing a curriculum attached to it, we're going to be under education. Everything else is in community. It really depends like how you're seeing this life and focusing your team and just having your team go full force with it.
Right.
Interesting.
I think too that there's a real challenge in the country. It's been happening for the last 10 years, really. But the word education, when it comes to people outside your building, is a dirty word. If you find or create a program that could be groundbreaking or life-changing, and you put the word education in the title of it, adults don't want to participate because they don't want to go to school. Kids don't want to participate because, that just looks like I'm gonna have to memorize something. And so even though we're describing our departments as education, I have at least found here that we have to be a little bit more clever about the way that we're communicating those differences to our community locally, because it really impacts participation.
Oh, that's fascinating.
I love what both Gary and Marisol are saying. And what we discovered at NJPAC was that we had to spend a lot of time educating internally. Our, VPs, AVPs, what exactly are we doing? And it wasn't until probably 2-3 years in that our development department actually started to understand how they could monetize community engagement and started asking more questions. And, can we bring programming to our corporate sponsors for their, heritage months, and provide this for their business resource groups? And so we're now one of the greatest resources of NJPAC because they see the value of what we do. And that wasn't something that we could necessarily narrate. It's because we did it. And then they can see the impact from the various communities that we're targeting. So the internal education process, I wouldn't say that's quick, but it's absolutely an investment that will serve the organization very well. I know that for a number of our proposals, they add on community engagement as part of the offering, because often what we're hearing from donors are saying, well, we've already funded your jazz series. We've already funded this. What else do you have? Oh, we have these great community initiatives. Really? Tell me more. And that allows them to have a footprint in communities that they want to reach as well. So, but that took time. That was not automatic, but I think we're close. We're pretty consistent with that now. And the other question about, just the perception in the communities and how education and CE are different. One of the things we talk about all the time at NJPAC, our audiences, our community, they don't know the difference between, is this a community engagement event or is this arts education? They don't know. And we don't know if it's really important for them to know. We are clear on what we're doing and how we're advancing and trying to collaborate as much as possible. So because we're now under the umbrella of social impact, there's much more of a stronger forum for us to intersect than before. And so I personally, this is my personal belief, I do believe that both of these departments should be separate, because I do think the functions have a separate identity, but the intersectionality it's got to be clean, consistent, and relevant. So now when I started the social justice programs 5 years ago, producing these monthly programs, panel discussion, film discussions, now arts education has social impact programs. And so I just kind of heard about it on the fly. I didn't even know they were doing it. And then I was like, oh, well, what topics are you using? So now we make sure that we're in alignment with the topic. So as they're teaching artists and faculty and learning about a topic, so are our audience as well. And then we cross-promote each one. But that took time. That wasn't automatic, but we're there now. So I just want to stress that it takes time.
Donna, I love that you share that internally, we know that we're separate, but everybody else doesn't need to know that or even care. And what's funny is I think we have a really strong marketing department at Seattle Theater Group. And one of the beautiful things that happened was that our marketing team looked at our webpage and we had it broken down in community engagement and education, right? And the community team came back to us and said, who is this helping? Is it helping you and your department internally, or is it helping the community? Is this easy for community to understand? And I was like, great question. And they revamped our entire page where it doesn't talk about community engagement. It doesn't talk about education. Audiences or participants don't need to know that. we know this internally, but nobody else outside knows or even cares. They just either want to be part of an experience, they want to be part of our programs, they want to participate, and that's all they need to know. It's up to us. Our job is to figure out how we are shaping the work that we're doing. So
I want to add to, I hope this doesn't derail us a little bit, but what's percolating underneath a lot of our conversation too is data. It's this idea that the work that we're doing is actually making an impact. And our challenge has always been, how can we quantify the qualitative experiences, right? And so Donna and Marisol don't know this quite yet, but Dayton Live is a part of a cohort that is revamping all of our surveys that is looking to measure things like belonging and loneliness and literal physical and mental health. And we're looking at measuring patrons longitudinally over at least a year. And then we're going to be collating all of that with the 19 other organizations. This is sort of a Midwest thing. It started here in Ohio. I'm saying it not because, hey, we're a part of it, but it really, our challenge and what Marisol was just saying about the community reports and us talking to the community, giving our development department some information that they can use to fundraise. Funders are so tired of the correlative conversation we have of, well, if a kid does a theater class, then they're going to make A's on their test, right? It has just been blown out of correlated proportion. And so what this initiative is looking to do is to capitalize on what the social service sector has already figured out, adapt it to the arts, and then figure out how to then transfer that data to a conversation. So that's ongoing as we speak, but it literally is going to become kind of a bedrock to this work, because as we start seeing communities really scramble for resources, which, is currently happening as we speak, we can step in as these arts organizations and maybe find ways for us to use what we know to fill in some of those gaps where we are seeing a real need. We're not going to ever be a food bank, but the idea of creating a space for people to gather and create really does change mental health. And so my hope is that we are going to actually be able to measure that and show effectiveness.
Wow, Gary, that's amazing. You actually took one of the questions right off my list, which was about metrics, which is fantastic. I would love to hear more about that as that gets rolling and as data starts coming in. But to tag on to that, Marisol and Donna, if you have any other thoughts on metrics and measuring and reporting out that you want to share in that vein, I'd love to hear that, because that is one of the most challenging parts of this work, as Gary was saying, right? We have sort of these correlative conversations, and if A happens, we think B happens, but how do you actually put that into a report for people?
Well, Newark is such a tight community. It would be more challenging in New York City to look at the same kind of metrics that we can in Newark, but because literally everybody kind of knows everyone, we're able to see impact. And we measure impact by not just attendance, but the word of mouth and how people feel more comfortable talking about NJPAC. When I first started, this is my 13th season at NJPAC. When I first started, it was not all, oh, we're so happy NJPAC is here. And so I know that community engagement had a lot to do with transforming that perception that we were this big white institution, like a Carnegie Hall, that's in this, struggling city. Newark, it's like, why do we need them here? So now that's not a question. They see the value of that. And a lot of it's with our real estate initiatives, building a new family center that will open next year, redesigning our whole plaza so it'll be a 24/7 kind of performance space, hosting the Lionsgate Film Studio, which is the largest in the Northeastern corridor. We already have one apartment building that's been fully occupied. We're building another one with 175 units and then 11 townhouses. So we take the role of cultural anchor institution very seriously. Mm-hmm. So we drive economy in Newark. That is clear. That is no one can challenge that because we're bringing revenue, and we've changed that. And so that has been very helpful in the narrative about what does this community engagement look like, and how the institution's vision of driving revenue is supported by our footprints in these various communities with the programs that we do. So that is one way I think that we've kind of addressed that, looking at the metrics itself. And then, of course, we look at the whole arts and well-being, which Gary is talking about. We have a department called Arts and Well-being, which is part of our social impact team. And the focus there is to look at everyone's wellness, internal and external. And so we have social prescription, so that, residents of Newark can go to their doctors and say that I'm really not feeling well. And rather than get a prescription for an antibiotic, they will get a prescription to go see a show of their choice, or to go do glass making, or go, get books, or whatever it is. And the insurance companies that we have established relationship with will pay for that. So that's clear measurements of how the emotional condition of our community, how it's being impacted. And it's exactly as Gary said, the loneliness and the depression is at an all-time high. Unbelievable. I believe the arts are the solution to everything. So I am definitely biased, and I don't care, because that's my belief. And so I just think that what we're doing, this is the answer.
Well, and I literally just heard last Friday a very similar program to what you're just talking about, taking off in Utah, actually, and sort of in the mountain states. So they are engaging in the same sort of work with insurance companies and arts as prescription, which is fascinating. And I'm so glad to hear that is spreading across the country. It's a fascinating concept and about time. So, Marisol, do you have anything to add?
No, I actually have a question for Donna as we're talking about this. And Donna, do you find that because you guys are doing so much and you guys are such a large organization and doing so well, do you find that affects at all in any of the funding that you get because you guys are one of the largest? Because that is something that we encounter within our organization as well, as we are applying for different programs, and we share the impact and all the great things that we're doing. And I can share all the greatness, but there's a lot that we do, but that is something that I do think that sometimes that can reflect negatively when it comes to applying for different grants, because we are a large organization, because we are doing all of this, are you experiencing something similar or not so?
Well, fortunately, many of the members of our board are these very same entities that we are providing programs for, that we're bringing in our community initiatives to, that they're the hospitals that have embraced the arts and well-being. So one of the skills of our president and CEO, John Schreiber, he has the ability to focus his lens on what is an opportunity to monetize our work. And so far, I've not heard of that kind of conflict, but that we keep expanding. So even with our social justice program, that started off, the getting funding was for arts education, and now it's well into social justice because their employees asked for it. They said, all this crazy stuff going on in the world, what can we do? And the leadership there said, well, we're a corporation. We can't just build all these programs, but find someone who can. And so that's where NJPAC came in. And so we're given resources to be able to really kind of execute what they're hearing internally and how they want to address some of these social justice issues. With regard to the arts and well-being, the hospitals thrilled because it changes, the perception of hospital, that they can be a positive place because it's about preventative health care. And they have actually endowed our arts and well-being department. So it will last for a very long time. So we try to find that sweet spot. It's like a science. Like what's that trend? What can we feed? How can we respond and stay true to mission? Essential to stay true to mission. So far, it's good. The whole real estate, that's a whole nother level of funding. That's not even from the nonprofit. That's the state. That's the city, the state that are providing a lot of initiatives because they can see how this is driving revenue for their city. So we're fortunate to have a really smart team of excellence. They're just at the top of their game.
Katie, I think another thing to jump onto what Donna is saying too is like there are listeners out there that are going to be like, oh my gosh, these are three very large entities that have all these resources. And it takes a lot of time to build up all of these kinds of programs. And I think one of the more simple ways to measure some of your success or impact, if you are part of something that may be a little bit smaller or a startup idea, is to think about your bandwidth. And so if over time you, for instance, maybe you're a one person department, you know, when I joined Dayton Live 12 years ago, I was a one person department, and now we're five, and that took a lot of time. But we're not in a giant city. I'm in a teaching artist desert. I have to use everything I know to try to like figure out how we can deploy some of these programs effectively. But as you begin to add, maybe you've hired a teaching artist for something all of a sudden. Maybe you've got a part-time hourly admin assistant all of a sudden. Those are markers of success for you. That'll be tied to money, and it'll be tied to time and fundraising. And I think that for those people that are finding that sweet spot that Donna talked about, and you see the impact that you're making, don't be discouraged by the idea that you feel like it's taking too much time or it's taking too long, or because a lot of this stuff can move at glacial speed, but that doesn't mean it's not being successful. You need to figure out how you want to measure your success. Your boss may be a dollar amount. Your boss may tell you, well, I need 30 people in here, otherwise we're not going to get the funding. There can be constraints, but if you are really looking at a way to measure the impact that you're having on your community, you can find ways to do that move away from those kinds of, bare minimum, like the number of people who participated or the amount of money we got in tuition or how many grants did we actually apply for and receive. Those are all important, but they may not dive into that essential question for you as the practitioner about why am I doing this? And why are we as an organization involved? So mission drift and focus is really important to stay tuned as well. Check your bandwidth, because as it begins to tighten and you need to add people to expand your bandwidth, that is a great measure of success.
I love that.
Bravo.
Thank you for offering that up. Yeah, absolutely.
Bravo.
And you know what, Gary, even to add more to this, because when we think about our smaller arts organizations as well, one of the things that I think it's also important to do is whatever you said as your foundation for tracking and whatever that may be. And there's a lot of organizations out there that have like examples that can be shared across multiple arts organizations, is that it will be ever evolving. That will change each time. Your focus is different depending on what you're working on. If your main initiatives are DEIA or your main initiatives are, growth in your department or growth organizationally, to keep in mind that will be ever evolving. It could continue to shift the way that you're looking at things, and keep on saving that information, because that information, never get rid of it. That's my main thing. Never get rid of your data, because you will be able to go back 10 years from now and you can see that glacier move, and then it will be a significant move.
That's right.
So that's something that's just important to keep for those that are smaller organizations. Keeping their data is essential, and hopefully finding the right tool to data track is also important. So,
wow, that I love that advice, and that is honestly, I would love to keep this conversation going, but in the interest of time, I think we're going to have to wrap. We might have to do like part 2, part 3, part 4 of this conversation. So I would like to invite each of you to think, what is and offer up to our audience or our listeners, either a piece of advice or the most important lesson you've learned in the community engagement space that you think is important to share with those, particularly I would say in small to mid-sized organizations that are struggling with the things you just talked about, Gary: funding and budgeting and staffing, mission drift, making this a priority in their communities. What's a lesson you've learned or a piece of advice you'd like to offer up?
To be authentic, to be honest, to recognize your capacity. I think trying to overpromise is just not going to serve anyone well. To promise, oh yeah, we can come and do 20 things. No, do one and do it brilliantly, like the best that you can do. So I think it is absolutely, and knowing that this is heart-centered work. And so there's a built-in forgiveness and grace, because we don't get everything right. Sometimes it's like, oh, what were you thinking? But that's okay, because the heart is leading the way.
Yes, and I would also add to what Donna said is make sure that you continue to embrace your own curiosity about the things and the people and the cultures and the spaces that you are unfamiliar with. If you walk in intimidated or you walk in fear, no good is ever going to come from that. It really needs to be an open heart, authentic curiosity, and by honoring the people that you want to serve, by opening up your ears and listening, taking time to authentically connect with them, all of that will pay off somehow for you.
Yes.
Yes, and recognizing that you are not alone doing this work. I think
Right.
that the most beautiful thing about community engagement is that what I was mentioning earlier on, that both should feel good. It's a good pairing.
Mhm.
A lot of the time, community is there to help you build as well. You're working with them to do something together.
Mhm.
So lean on the communities that you're working on, and they will lean on you and make sure that there's a beautiful balance to it. But my second advice to this is maintain those genuine relationships. It's hard when you go in, you do one thing, and you're like, peace out, see you next year. It's like, what did you do throughout the year to maintain that relationship with the community? How did you bring them in? How did you invite them to other events? How did you make sure that they were part of your list? How did you make sure that you did a shout out for them on social media? How did you, all these different things that continue on, so that next year when you come back again and check in with them to see if you're wanting to collaborate again in that project, they're there with you saying like, of course, not a problem. You need to maintain those relationships. So it's the
Wonderful.
genuine, what Miss Donna said.
Yes.
Mhm.
Perfect note to end on. Marisol, Donna, and Gary, thank you so much for your time today. It was such a pleasure to have you here on There's No Business Like, and open invitation to come back and have more of this conversation again in the future. It was such a pleasure to have you all.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And listeners, we hope you will join us again next week on There's No Business Like. See you soon.
All right, everyone. Thanks for listening to There's No Business Like. Our producers and hosts are Brian Zelmer, Josh Benson, Kevin Maynard, Katie Miller, and me, Danielle Van Hook. Views expressed in this podcast are ours alone and are not reflective of the organizations we are a part of. Keep up with us at nobusinesslike.com. There you'll find links to all of our episodes and socials. If you like this podcast, give us a like, a follow, a review, or our favorite, a 5-star rating. Oh wait, what was that site? I got it, don't worry. It is nobusinesslike.com. Do I sound out bus-I-ness every time I type it? Yep, sure do. Stay in touch, my friends.